All right, I guess we're ready to go. Call this meeting to order. Roll call.
Joey Monkowski.
Here.
Jeffrey Dwyer.
Here.
David Ramsey.
Here.
Mike Bryant.
Here.
Mark Baker. Here. Colin Cohen. Absent. Coppers.
Present.
Okay. So we have a quorum. All right. And we need to approve the agenda. I need to add something to the agenda. Bear with me. We have a proposal for an access easement with a potential variance on 787 Eagle Mountain Boulevard. I would like to, I need to just say that we're going to add it to the agenda. I just need to say that we're going to add it to the agenda, and I need to, unless anybody has an objection. Any objection? Okay. So we will add Mr. Moore's request to the agenda.
Okay. Has that, the details changed about that from last meeting?
Yes. Most definitely. Okay. And has everybody read the minutes from the last meeting? Have any changes? Do I have a motion to approve?
I had one question about it. He had noted on the approval of the agenda as public road that we're discussing on Eagle Mountain Boulevard. Is that correct, or were we discussing it being a private road?
It was a private road, yes. So we do need to amend item 4 on approval of agenda, line 3. It says public road. That was actually a private road, is what was presented. Are there any other changes or? I have a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. Okay. First on our agenda is the proposed land use plan revision. This is going to be for the old Grace Hospital. Okay. Rob, would you like to expound?
Discuss it.
Let's discuss.
We had considered the possibility of having a public hearing, but I thought it would probably be better to do that maybe next month, because I think some discussion is in order. This all got started because of the discussion about what would happen to the hospital and the possibility of a residential development in the area of that block, and whether we should take another look at the land use plan to determine if it's still relevant, whether we should change the plan to allow residential at that location instead of just commercial, whether we should change the zoning to allow different kinds of residential uses instead of being further restricted on having the ground floor being commercial or commercial or something like that. And I thought this would be a good opportunity to look at what our plan says about downtown altogether. Because when it was originally drafted, starting in 2007, the downtown area was pretty much defined by what the zoning was for T1 at that point in time. And as I looked at it, I said, let's take a look at what the uses are right now as opposed to what they were, 15 years ago. We have a little bit more residential in the area now than we had before. We have more entertainment kinds of commercial, including restaurants, than we had before. We don't have a pool hall anymore. We have a pocket park. We have another kind of park. We don't have automobile dealers. Things have changed. And so it seemed to me that maybe we might want to take another look at the plan instead of just that one block of what we really want to take a look at a little bit more broadly. It seemed to me that we had defined downtown differently. Since the time the plan was created, we have created a historic commercial district. The boundaries of that don't coincide with what the plan shows as downtown. And we have also created an entertainment district, which is a recognition that different kinds of uses have come into the downtown area and that it's expanded its diversity and focus. It just seemed to me that maybe that might drive something about what we do with what the zoning district allows and requires, and whether we might want to think about what the actual size and shape of the district is and what it's looking for. For instance, the district went into an area that, in my mind, is clearly warehousing and large-scale development, or just commercial. So it could go more industrial the further east or west you get, especially in areas that are in the floodplain. Downtown may have, when it was originally looked at, looked more like kind of the old city, as opposed to where the real core of commercial development was, which is, in my mind, about a block west of Central and up to about 3rd, 4th Street. The bank and City Hall are probably the eastern terminus of what's downtown. So the plan might change its scope, and it's simply recognizing that there's a slight change in what the use is, and so if somebody wanted to develop something in the downtown area, T1 would be appropriate. If they wanted to develop something outside of what we consider the land use area, and we could maybe change it from T1 to something else. I wouldn't recommend changing the zoning just because the land use plan might look differently. The real issue in my mind is, do we want to change the land use plan and open it up? For instance, the area around the Grace Hospital is simply shown as commercial downtown. The truth of the matter is, what you're proposing there is really potentially a hybrid commercial residential mixed use, which we did, in the area south of Harrison and over towards the hospital. We have a mixed residential commercial area. I think that's a real legitimate use for at least that portion of the downtown, which would kind of legitimize maybe a high-density residential use. At the same time, we may want to consider changing the zoning code, which right now, it requires the front part of the first floor be commercial use, at least the front part. It has to be the part facing the street, not just Main Street. The front part of facing the street has to be commercial. The back part of the first floor could be residential as a conditional use. That's something that could be changed if we wanted to change the land use plan to allow some mixed use or even residential use in certain parts of the area. It seems to me that we're seeing more residential use downtown. And I think that's probably a good deal, and I think it reflects the fact that downtown's changing from kind of a hardcore governmental commercial core to a mixed use core, because you've got entertainment, you've got residential, you've got pocket parks. It's different, and I think the plan is different than what it is right now. So that's one of the things I wanted you to think about. I'm not making any specific recommendations, but what I sent you was a comparison of the current zoning against what the current land use plan is showing, and another one showing the current land use compared to the actual use as well as I understood it. I was kind of hoping that I'd get a chance to talk to the Main Street Batesville manager to see what their kind of plans were. It strikes me that the plans for the downtown, the commercial historic district, the entertainment district, the Main Street program, and the Wayne plan ought all be talking to each other. They ought to be consistent. And I think that kind of discussion ought to be going on. I think we've got time to have those discussions before we get serious about what we want to do about any one block or any one structure. That's the reason I put those things out there for you to look at and think about. That make sense?
Mm-hmm. Any thoughts from you guys?
I mean, I think it's something that definitely needs to be looked at, and like you said, obviously it's changed over the years.
I think it would be a really good idea to bring the Main Street manager in here and see what the program is. Because when that program started, I was in my department, state government when it started, and the whole idea was to say dying downtowns. And Batesville was in the first wave, and downtown was struggling back in those days. And that was back in the late 80s. It was struggling. And so the focus of the program, at least then, was pretty much commercial revitalization. Batesville's only a pet side. But I don't know what the agenda of the program is right now. And I'm not real sure what the objective of the entertainment district is. Maybe somebody from the Chamber of Commerce could talk about that, or maybe some downtown merchants. And there will be somebody sitting in here saying, here's what we think we ought to be doing.
Do we feel this would be best suited for this, meeting, or is it something that we should do privately? Or not privately, but in a different venue and then bring it here?
Next meeting, have a discussion with somebody.
Okay, so we need to invite, I agree. I think there's some good models too. Jonesboro is a kind of a personal favorite of mine, how they've done it. The Main Street has stayed pretty true to what we have here with the commercial on the street frontage, and there are some apartments, but they're not street level. And then you go over one street, and then it opens up to mixed use with the commercial and the residential pretty easily mixed together. So that model has obviously been successful for Jonesboro. I don't know why it's not something to look at. I think we need more input.
When I originally recommended a public hearing, I was pretty much thinking, let's look at this one block. But I decided maybe it's time to look beyond that. And so that's why I think it's a good idea to put it off. I don't think we need to re-advertise it. We might want to make a motion to move it to next month, or even you can postpone it a couple of times before you really need to re-advertise.
Okay. I mean, does anybody have any discussion before we make a motion?
I agree. If you want to plan for the future, you need to plan for what you anticipate being down there. Like you said, change. I don't see much more industrial or governmental going down there, car lots or, I mean, seriously. We do want restaurants, we do want, businesses, even commercial businesses, shops, stores, whatever, and then like you said, you really need, once you get beyond a certain point, there's not a whole lot of need to save that area historically. Everything needs to be filled with something different.
Okay. Do I have a motion to move this discussion to next month's meeting?
I'll make that motion to table the discussion till next month's meeting.
Second. All in favor? All right, motion passes. All right, and then the new items to the agenda, I will step aside because I have a representation interest with some of the parties. So I will let.
Only one, who's our vice chair? Should be him.
Okay, Jeffrey.
Jeffrey, come on in.
And Mr. Moore will be presenting.
morning, Mr. Chair.
You have the floor.
Good. Okay, so we appeared before you at last month's meeting and said we need some time to work this out, and I think we have worked it out. So with all interested property owners and people who are currently under contract to purchase property, we've reached a proposal. I'm going to thank the city of Batesville. They've been very helpful. From your contract consultants, your engineer, and your staff, they've been very easy to deal with, and it made this as easy as possible for potential development, with also considering the desires of the property owners. So I represent Steve Bell, who's here with us. I've had some contact. Cheryl Wadley's here, and then David Wadley as well, and helped them get under contract. Trey Pepper, if you don't know him, he's a young lawyer in town, is under contract to buy the Bryant property. And Dr. Gottschalk, who I don't represent, is buying this entire parcel to then make into 5.01 acre tracts for development. So we have a proposal. I don't know that it's necessary, but there's the question. So to the extent anything we're requesting requires a variance or waiver, we're all in agreement we want to request that of your regulations. But our proposal was to leave the existing driveway and existing 12-foot driveway to service to the 787 Eagle Mountain. I hope you have my document in front of you so you can see that. The driveway goes about 350 feet roughly back.
Sorry, we've not been provided with.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't think we.
I thought you had that. I can go upstairs and get that for you so you can see what we're talking about. You probably would like to know what we're talking about.
I can try to run some copies. Was that from the email this morning?
Yes, yeah. So, and this doesn't make a lot of sense, since you haven't seen the written proposal. I'm sorry about that. If you're familiar with this previous development, there's a large tract of land. Dr. Strickland originally built a house that Steve Bryant lived in, and had access from Gap Road. And so there's power running from Gap Road to Steve Bryant's home, but it has frontage and access to Eagle Mountain Boulevard. So it's a private driveway that's about 12 feet in width and about 325 feet in length that accesses 787 Eagle Mountain Boulevard. There's land to the north and the south, and there's quite a bit of land to the east that abuts Gap Road. Our proposal puts in restrictions on the use that suited up to 2 lots, one above, one below the Bryant home, where it cannot be developed for more than one home, has to be at least 2,000 square feet. It can never be a connection with Gap Road that's unbroken from any of these 3 homes, including the Bryant home. So this would not be a through street. There's a private roadway agreement where the city would not be responsible for any maintenance of the existing roads, and property owners agree. This is not just be a private agreement, it's something that would be in their deed chain, and then there would be separate easements for the 2 lots above and below to provide access to Eagle Mountain Boulevard. And there's also an agreement for additional easements for utilities to the extent they need that. Now, my client is also going to require some buffer land for his lot 1 at South Ridge and Eagle Mountain. It's a little bit bigger. It's not a lot, but his land will get a bit bigger. So there's potentially going to be a driveway around his home. I understand the Wadleys are purchasing the land immediately behind their home as sort of a buffer to protect their land. So really we're talking about potential, in reality, for 1 new lot to be developed for construction potentially behind Mr. Bell's home, and we provided for that. So I think it meets the definition of a vehicular access easement in your regulations, because it is super steep back there. If anyone's driven down, if you're supposed to drive down the golf cart path on Eagle Mountain Boulevard that connects, not Eagle Mountain, but the cul-de-sac to Mountain Ridge, that is a very steep hill. I tried to push the stroller up one. It isn't so.
It's very steep.
Yeah, and so we're on the same grade here. It's maybe not as steep, but it's pretty close. So I think the hillside regulations for a vehicular access easement fit this nicely. So I think we're all in agreement, except the fire code is the problem. And so the proposal that I think we've reached is, if there's a home built on the lot to the north or the lot to the south, if there's a home built, then the existing driveway would be expanded to 20 feet. And that would satisfy the perceived fire issue. So with that change, and the proposal you don't have in front of you, I'm sorry, I should have brought copies for you.
He's making
Here.
all the various
would be-
Yeah, that's my question.
as far as the construction of any expansion on that, to widen that road.
And I don't agree that this is a private road. I think that this is a driveway with an easement. I don't know that there's really needs any work to do before the commission, candidly, but to the extent there is, that this is a private road, we would request a variance, or a waiver of any requirement for the construction to be to a certain standard, for certain width. The vehicular access easement, if that's what this is limited to 300 feet. I think this is about 350 feet. And it has to be 20 feet in width, which right now it's 12 feet in width. So we are requesting a variance of that in particular, but if it applies.
Yes.
Sure.
What hardship is there that necessitates variance?
So there's a number of hardships. The first hardship is that the current use of the property as proposed to the south and to the north would not have access otherwise. And so we have a real problem in attaining access to Eagle Mountain Boulevard for the lots to be created. And I hope when the proposal is printed, you'll see that. So there's a major issue with access. That lot that they're proposing to create, 5.01 acres, the only other access point would be to try to go straight down to Gap Road, which would be difficult, if not impossible, or to cut over to the south, connect with that one-lane alley down between Mountain Ridge and Eagle Mountain. There's really not another place for them to connect. It makes any sense. This makes perfect sense. It connects with the existing driveway.
It does with the public street.
If you put a public street there, there's not enough room, first.
So 150305, every lot shows a public street, except for the private street is approved. And the private street would have to meet the city code, and nothing you're supposed to do.
Okay.
Residential.
So these lots would have deeded legal access. First, the 787 Eagle Mountain Boulevard does, would own the fee up to the current Eagle Mountain Boulevard. The lot to the south and the lot to the north would have a deeded easement access over the 12 feet. And so it does have, I think in the definition section, it does have deeded legal access to a city street, through a driveway.
Deeded to the city, because that would make it a public street.
No.
Otherwise, it would be a private street, and it would be the code.
It's not deeded to the city, it would be deeded to the property owner, but the restrictions in their chain of title.
And I think we don't know what their construction suggestion is, but I think that's the variance that they're asking for, just for clarification on the speaker,
Yeah, that's for the.
is not to build a private street, city street. I think that's the variance that they're wanting to ask for.
Again, I see no hardship right there.
Okay, so,
Because why should we set a precedent for this?
the short answer is because this development can't happen otherwise. I mean, there is
No,
no,
the intention of the code that a development like this does not happen without a public street. That is the intention of the code.
I would respectfully disagree. I think that, Arkansas law recognizes the right of individuals to use their property as they see fit, subject to city regulation, which has to be reasonable and proper. This particular issue that we're dealing with is that there's a contention about the ownership of the current area between 787 Eagle Mountain Boulevard, the home Steve Bryant has, as they have, and Eagle Mountain Boulevard. So the ownership of that land is in dispute, by virtue of the use of that land. I don't remember if you were at the last meeting or not, you may have been. But
That only complicates the issue.
it does complicate the issue. So if there's only 12 feet, if we were to not have worked this out as we have, we would be in court fighting over the legal boundaries. And right now, there's only 12 feet available of ownership to connects with a much larger tract to the back that also abuts Gap Road. And I don't know
That tract which we're discussing and has not been subdivided into these tracts that you're discussing, this hardship, or so this hardship doesn't exist.
So there's a contract in place to sell, and there are some other contracts in place to also sell these lots.
This meets the definition of subdivision by the code, because it necessitates a public street access. It doesn't matter whether it's 5 acres or 5.01.
I disagree as I read your code. About 5 acres does not trigger subdivision regulations.
But needing access to a public street does, and it says that all lots shall abut a public street.
When I read the definition, I tried to look at that, because I know there was some discussion of trying to create a 5.01 acre lot, to move this outside of the subdivision regulations. And
Again, asking for more removal of the code or variance.
well, no, it's not actually. The code itself includes,
Asking for preferential treatment.
no, we're asking you to apply the regulations as written. And you have in your regulation a vehicular access easement which specifically addresses servicing less than 5 lots on a hillside area like this, with an easement, which is what we're proposing. It's specific in your regulations, it's there. The variance is the distance from 300 feet to 350 feet. That's the first variance. And then the second is the width being 12 feet as opposed to 20. Which it's actually not, because if there's construction of a home to meet the fire code, it would expand to 20 feet. So
Well, the grade issues that you, article.
there's major issues from the other areas. It's not in this place. My understanding is it can be done here. This is the only way to create access to the proposed 5.01 acre tract itself, as I understand it. It wasn't my idea to do that. That's the deal we have.
I mean, they've got plenty of access to the rest of the lot over Gap Road.
They don't.
Access they want.
So they don't. The access to Gap Road right now, is I've never walked it. My understanding is
It
it's
doesn't
not.
matter what it is now. They have the ability to make one.
It would be
The
impossible.
owner of the lot now that's selling it off in the parcel, that can dedicate a public street right over Gap Road to these parcels.
They could,
And then you build a city street standard.
I guess they could. I'm not sure about that though, because.
Again, there's no hardship here, there's no need to do a variance.
So the current house, if you know the area, which I don't know if you do or you don't, I mean, I've lived there for 11 years and I haven't gone down this area. My understanding is that the road that connects with Gap Road is not maintained, is very steep, and is not in use. And
So
so,
you have two accesses that don't meet each other. It's not, or it's not our problem.
okay, so, again, we're asking you to apply your own regulation of the vehicular access easement. I'm sorry you don't have the documents in front of you, I'd like to get them so you can see it. But there is a definition of the vehicular access easement this meets. And what we're proposing, the only difference would be between 300 feet and 350 feet.
And the width.
No, the width wouldn't apply. So right now, it's already there, right?
So
So,
you were asking for a variance on that, because of that.
yes, that was our initial proposal. I was taking you through the history of what we've agreed to. To meet the fire standards, it would have to increase to 20 feet if a home is constructed.
My only question regarding that is who would be responsible for that cost?
Just the private landowners.
And all the landowners that are involved in this are in agreement to move forward.
100%.
No
That
issue.
was kind of my opinion, or I'm not opinion, but the question is, the interested parties that were involved, so from Damon to the city to, and then of course the fire chief had a couple bits of concern, but all other parties are
We're fine. we've all worked out our issues. We put in restrictions on the development of these, not just the 2 lots, but also the Bryant home as well, which is there and is under contract to be sold as is, with connection to Eagle Mountain Boulevard. And these are outside of the Eagle Mountain subdivision. There are no protections. This could, I mean, other than zoning. I mean, we all, as property owners, have concerns that something different than single-family homes could be constructed in this area that could change the character of the neighborhood. So, I mean, there's some real benefit to the property owners to having this deal approved. And I question whether it's a private road, or I don't think it's a public road at all. We want to avoid there being a public road. We don't want to dedicate it to the city. We don't want the city to maintain it. There's a private roadway agreement that's going to be part of the easement, part of the deed, where the private owners share in the cost of maintenance of this particular driveway that they would share for their home. And so, you know, it's something that they've all worked out to their satisfaction.
I'm familiar with the area, and I think if all parties are in agreement, and the city officials are in agreement, then I think I would be in favor of moving forward as presented.
My concern, I share Mike's concern of setting a precedent for future applications, and who we then say no to in the future for similar issues. If we are worried about the city having to take responsibility for a road constructed by someone else, and we end up with problematic infrastructure like we already got on our hands from having to take over.
And you got people already right now that don't want to do the road work, that don't want to pay the money, and like you just asked, who's gonna pay for it in the future when the time gets built? And then how are you gonna control whether those lots get sold off in the future? And then those people that buy it, that weren't privy to this information that you're supposedly gonna put on the deed, then they're saddled with a bill that they didn't expect, or who are they gonna complain to?
Well, it's not
They're gonna come right back here to the city.
It's not just supposedly going to put on
Public disservice to set this precedent by doing this for you.
It's not just supposedly something we're going to put on the deed. It's under a written contract signed by all the parties to this, that it will be included as closing on the deed. Even Mr. Pepper, who's under contract right now to buy the home, signed off and approved this, so he would know the restrictions, that we're not just putting them in a written contract no one's going to see. It's something that will be included in the language in the deed. These are restrictive covenants that are spelled out. I've given you a summary. I'm sorry if you don't have it. But these are restrictive.
And
You have it now.
to that, I don't believe we're supposed to be voting on anything that we've not been given ample time with the material. The fact that we didn't receive this material until in the meeting is
I'm sorry.
problematic. And I'm sorry too, I'm hesitant because I've not really had time to even read this.
Sure. Do you have the attachments to it?
Yes, I do, I can look at it.
Good. Good.
And I'm curious about this part here. I can't quite tell, sometimes lines aren't exactly, fully accurate, but is there a connection with this road on the new Eagle Mountain development?
Mountain Range.
No, that is not part, that is just to give you a reference point, that is not part of what he's talking about.
Okay,
And there's no way to connect to it.
so it wasn't that okay.
And he was asking up the
This coming off of Gap Road
Not part of it.
is, but that's an easement. Is that a legal deed of easement to these up here?
No.
No, it's just part of the property as it's constructed.
Our proposal specifically prohibits the connection of access to Gap Road with Eagle Mountain Boulevard. So we will have a restricted covenant in the deed to prevent an unbroken connection. Not that it's even possible, but we felt that was beneficial to the other property owners not have that.
Again, not having the information until as late as we did,
Yeah.
I honestly don't think that we are allowed to vote on this per our bylaws. And there is concern of setting precedents, I'm not sure that we shouldn't consult our attorney.
Now, what would be your take on any of those things there?
And I believe this when I have some comments. I'll start out by making a modest recommendation to you that this is not the zoning regulations. It's the subdivision regulations and land development code. Okay.
Okay.
I guess, let's start out by saying that this started years ago when a piece of property was landlocked in the middle, some 38 acres of property. That property did not have access to a public street. It went through another piece of property, 35 acres or so, to Gap Road, and through another property that connected it to Eagle Mountain Road. But the property was still landlocked. It was owned by one person, but the property was landlocked. And what this is basically doing is proposing to create access to a public street by way of somebody else's property. And I have a little concern about that. Every lot that is developed should have access, direct access to a public street. That's why even a private street would work, because if you can design it in such a way that it had access to a street, public or private, with held at least minimally to public standards, that would qualify. One thing that really concerned me, and it was the proposal, and it will be hard to see on the copy that you've got now. If you get a copy digitally, it should make more sense. On one of the items, it says that Steve Bell is proposing to purchase a small parcel of land both to the south of the existing street and to the east of the existing property line. I think it was 20 feet. That would create a small parcel, and that would in effect create a subdivision. What they've been trying to avoid is having a subdivision, and the regulations say that a subdivision is not a subdivision if it's 5 acres or more. One of the things you all need to be looking at some point in the future is that or more is not defined. Is it 5.01 or is it 6? It's unclear. That's something that they probably could make a decision about when you were looking at something, and that might be a waiver or at least a clarification to say, yes, we would accept that the 5 or more could be 5.1 or 5.01. 5.01, what bothered me a little bit about that was that you saw 4 parcels being created of exactly 5.01 acres. And I thought, that's kind of playing a game with the thing a little bit. 2 of them don't have anything to do with this, but that was concerning to me. But if you buy a piece of property by carving out of another piece of property and you diminish that property from 5 acres to something less, by definition, you have to create a subdivision. And then both, they may buy the smaller portion and amalgamate it with the larger lot, but you can create the subdivision to create that lot to buy. Follow me?
Right, but this one falls under the definition of subdivision because of the vehicular access.
If you did it at the front end, then the entire property becomes subject to the subdivision regulations, because one of the pieces of property would be less than 5 acres. If you do it after the fact, then the one property that was 5 acres that wanted to sell off a smaller portion would be less than 5 acres. And all of a sudden, then you would have a subdivision that was 2 lots, and you sell one of the lots off to another property. And that just creates a problem for how you process the thing. The whole point of trying to get away from the subdivision platting requirements is why you wanted to keep it 5 acres or more. And the proposal would do that. And yes, you can make it a private street. I have a problem, and I'm just hardcore, with creating access by way of somebody else's property. I mean, you can build in all the caveats you want to, and deed restrictions, I agree. The current property owners all agree to that. but I've just seen too many times when later property owners have a problem of some kind or another, and the only way you can protect against that is for it to flood that street. That's why you have pipe stem lots, and maybe less than 20 feet from the driveway to a property. But in this case, you've got 1, 2, 3 properties trying to access lot one pipe stem, and that's a problem. And what I'm telling you is that you're trying to create access by another person's property, and that just potentially creates a problem. And only one lot has direct access to the street. Those are my concerns with looking at this, and in terms of when you bring in hardship, the hardship cannot be created by the property owner. And if the hardship is, we got problems, there is no hardship if you design the thing so that you can get access. If you design it so they can't have access, you've created the hardship. Does that follow?
Well,
So those things need to be looked at, in my mind, before I think you can be comfortable with knowing what the precise requirements are and what the exceptions are that you're going to be asked to make. You're basically being asked not to approve something, but to allow something to happen.
and Rob, could I ask a question about
Yeah.
the hardship? The hardship is not created by the person that is purchasing any type of land, or parcel. It's created by an adjoining neighbor that believes that part of that land is his. So it's not completely, it is not under the control of the person that is going to own the entire parcel, because there's a disagreement between the two. So would that or would that not constitute a hardship? They don't have control over that entire parcel to create that, or we would have already done it. We actually had a solution that it was acceptable to them.
And that's a legal question that would have to be decided on the front end for the city, before the planning commission would feel comfortable saying, okay, that's the way the courts ruled, this is how, then you've got a hardship. Right now, it's a potential hardship.
That's one that we resolve in agreement. I mean, there's from my client's standpoint, if we retired lawyer and a lawyer lives across the street, it's really clear from our standpoint, to hold legal title. There's a difference between record title and legal title to a certain small area where there's on the south side of the driveway. And so we propose to get a deed to that to make it clear that he owns it, to resolve that issue as part of it. Now, I do, that's an interesting point about the 20-foot strip to the east that's creating a buffer with the back of lot one, which Steve Bell would essentially be adding to his lot one South Ridge, to give him more distance between the new driveway. There's also a 30-foot green belt easement on the new lot to further restrict construction behind his home. So, I mean, that is something that's part of the agreement, so.
I saw that, but what concerned me is, like, based off the drawing I saw, I couldn't tell whose property that buffer was on. I really couldn't tell whose property the 20-foot easement, or the 20-foot addition to the property was on, whether that lot below actually had an easement or access to the street, whatever it is. And until that gets clear, we don't know what's happening to that bottom line.
So there is
Is that another parcel? Is that gonna be added to this property?
part of the
So
arrangement.
now we're gonna have a separate 20-foot wide,
No, the 20, the design,
if you go to somebody else in the future?
I mean, you could tell, and it's a point, the 20-foot strip is being purchased by Steve Bell and added to his ownership interest in lot one. It actually goes behind lot one and lot two, Steve buying it under this proposal we have, which may not be possible.
And technically, it's a subdivision.
Technically, it's a separate strip of land, Steve is purchasing as part of the deal to allow sufficient room for the back of lot one, lot two, and the proposed driveway. The 30-foot green belt easement is over the new, lot three to the south that's proposed to be created. And so there's, the 30-foot green belt is an easement, it's a restriction on the use of that 30 feet.
So what makes sense to me, designing it for you, is the bottom lot is 5.01 acres. Make it 6 acres. Then if you shaved off something less than an acre, then it still wouldn't be a subdivision, because now you would still be left with at least 5 acres. I have to think about what's right.
Are you saying that, what I was understanding you to say is that the 20-foot strip that Steve is purchasing becomes a subdivision in the two, so maybe the whole thing becomes a subdivision?
The lot it comes off of would be, and that piece would be 2 lots of a new subdivision, because you have just split 5 acres into 4 plus something else. That's a new subdivision. That's the problem I'm having with the way it was drawn.
We're coming off of a 48-acre parcel.
Yeah, I think they're gonna expand the five,
Yeah.
they're gonna keep that description.
The way it would be done at one time, so that the original 48-acre parcel, that would come off by the lake. It would never be part of a smaller parcel. That was never.
But any one piece of the division of that large parcel is less than 5 acres, the whole thing's subject to the subdivision regulations and plat.
So if they did not, so you're, tell me if I'm wrong, but if they went ahead and parceled it as presented without the 20-foot strip, then parceled it, and one of the parcels was 6 acres, and then they took that half acre, just on a quarter acre off, it would.
Yeah, just to protect that 1 5 acre, make it larger, make them all a little bit larger. One of the things that originally bothered me was because we didn't have a precise definition of what greater than 5 acres is. And I suggested, well, I suppose the commission would live with 5.1, or something that's greater than 5, but 6 would be a whole lot clearer. And it ought to be possible simply because you've got 38 acres to mess with. Make them larger and make sure that you don't have a problem.
I mean, we're just talking about inside the city limits, why don't we just remove the 5 acres completely and do everything? So we just flat everything.
It's common practice to say if you've got really large things, and especially if you're
I don't
subdividing.
think we have anything really large left.
If you're dividing somebody's property as a result of a court order or an inheritance issue, you don't want to make them go through the whole planning process in order to inherit the property. And if it's large tracts, and the rule of thumb is that a large tract probably can have its own septic system and not have to worry too much about access to city services. So it doesn't impose as big a burden on city services, so we don't worry about them as much as having smaller lots that require city services.
I mean, it just sounds like we're trying to avoid meeting regulations at all costs instead of following regulations.
Regulations are clear, if it's 5 acres or more, it's not a subdivision. Provided that lots that are created have access, and I will only give you my philosophy.
Again, and they do not, so this is a
Should be
subdivision, whether it's 5 acres or not.
of the property, not the loan, property owned.
Our view is, and I think the view of the court, if we had to litigate this, would be that access is a legal right to access, and an easement is a legal right to access. And an easement is a deeded interest for ingress, and egress is unrestricted. And so, and you have an easement in your regulations too, for vehicular access on certain roads.
Okay, so what legal access then does the city have?
The same access that you're saying for the public,
Your easement.
so the city
From the
would,
owner of these 3 proposed lots across their easement, what legal right did you give to the city?
the city would not have any legal right to access other than the same legal right that it has to come onto my driveway at my home, and if they are called out for, some service, or say,
Exactly, and that's the issue, and that's what he's saying.
I'm not catching that, so
He says the city does not have legal access, you just said that.
I don't think the city does to private property.
That's what this is saying, is that every lot has to have access to a public street. The reason it has to have access to a public street so the city can service. These people would be cut off from city services.
Is it your,
City services would not have the legal right to cross this easement to get to them if the owners of the easement open it.
it's no different than the owner of the property saying that the city becoming a driveway, it's the same thing.
Except it would be a landlocked version of it. It would involve somebody other than the person that owns that piece of property.
I think you need to make a compelling case to the commission as to why an easement is much preferable to a direct access to that, like a cul-de-sac. By an easement is nowhere near as good as direct access. And if there is a profound reason for doing it differently, that's what they need to see in order to justify making an exception to what is clear in the city code.
And I mean, our motivation should be for the public's interest, which there is no interest of the public here. And our decision should not be made solely based on the landowner's desire to make money off of the property or increase the value of the property, and that's what this is.
I think from the public's interest standpoint, I'm going to address the easement point first, and an easement is just as good as a legal ownership. I mean, it is an interest.
But that's two parties, that takes it from one party setup to a two-party setup. There is an owner of the land, there is an owner of the easement. The servient estate. Dominant
serving estate for an easement, that's correct. And
so you're making a complicated issue here where there doesn't need to be a complicated issue. This needs to have public street access.
So, again, you're saying, so you think that public street access requires unqualified fee ownership?
I'm saying that public street access qualifies where the property abuts public right of way.
Okay.
Has frontage on public right of way.
And the phrase in your regulation is legal access, which is dedicated unrestricted easement for ingress and egress is public access. I don't know how it could be anything else.
Well, then you get into the driveway regulations, so it's gonna have to be on public right of way.
Maybe you see a driveway regulation that applies to this, but, I mean, our standpoint is that the reason we have to have an easement over the existing fee ownership, we could, one possibility would be to have all three lots owned undivided 1/3 interest in the 12-foot strip that currently exists and that lines through the current driveway, and that would solve your issue. But then that creates the uncertainty in the future of somebody partitioning that 12-foot strip. Any one of those three owners could partition it. That's not a good result. An easement is one person owns the fee, and then the other two lots to be created have an easement that's there, that's unqualified, that runs for ingress and egress to them. And the city has the same right to come across that easement as it does to come across a private driveway to come into my home. You think that there's an emergency, if there's a fire, if you think that, we call for service, or if you have, there's exigent circumstances, you can invade my privacy and come across my land, right, to enforce the law. But, I don't think that's a prohibition on access to city service. There already is, gas service and water service. The power runs at the back of the lot and not through Eagle Mountain Boulevard. But from the limited amount of land that we have that currently exists to serve from Eagle Mountain Boulevard to serve this larger tract, it had to be done by easement. And if we hadn't done it by easement, if we weren't doing it by easement, there's no, like I said, giving a 1/3 undivided interest creates the risk of partition, which wouldn't serve interest itself, that 12-foot strip.
Yeah, I would argue that dividing that into 4-foot pieces would not provide.
Wouldn't be very good for anybody,
Wouldn't
right?
provide the access that meets the code anyway.
Mr. Bell, do you have some comments?
With all due respect, I'm pretty plain spoken, and I'm not going to apologize. First off, I don't understand all the questions back and forth about the hardships.
They're asking for waivers of the code.
Yes, and the two parts. Hardships or practical difficulties. It's not and, it's or. And I would be happy to read a definition of practical difficulties. I've done this a long time, folks, and I can't imagine what Varian has said would fit the definition of practical difficulties. The strict compliance with these regulations would be served to a greater extent by the alternative proposal. This is a win-win situation. You made a comment about the public, I am the public, I have been for 75 years. And then I can't help but respond to the idea of a fire truck using a private driveway. Are you telling me that truck can't pull up in my driveway? That I own as is private?
No, I'm telling you that this doesn't meet the code.
So they can't pull up in my driveway. I have a private driveway.
Yeah, they
And I
can,
will let the fire trucks can pull up in there anytime they want to.
but that's different. Do you want your neighbor telling the fire truck they can't pull up into your driveway?
It's the same. I'm not sure I have seen. If you want to decline all this, I'm probably better off that it's not here.
If the proposal would met the code, the subdivision regulations, it doesn't meet it for the access, it doesn't meet it for the street design, it doesn't meet it for the fire code, it doesn't meet it for.
You can grant a variance every.
Yeah, you can grant.
You have the authority.
Why would I want to?
Because everybody's a win-win for the city.
How does the public win?
I'm the public.
Everybody in here is the
Eagle
public.
Mountain, I've lived up there a long time. Like I said, it's probably to my benefit if you guys vote this down, but it's not fair. Not gotcha, and we have spent an inordinate amount of time coming to a resolution that is fair and completely protects the city. This is a unique.
It's not about what you want. It's about what the city and what we are tasked with looking out for the public. And so if we do this for you, we are setting a precedent that anybody that wants to draw up an easement and divide up some land can just do whatever they want to and not even make it wide enough for the fire truck to get in here. Because what you're proposing at first is not even wide enough for the fire truck. Now they can't get down there now. It probably shouldn't be the way that it is now.
Help me, but I can't help that. I didn't create this. Then why do you have a variance in the code? Every time you grant a variance, it could set a precedent.
That's true. That's why we're not supposed to grant it.
But the language is there to fit this exact situation, guys.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
I'm not arguing, I'm saying it's allowed because of the language that's in the code. It's a win-win.
And all I'm saying is we should not.
You get to vote. I don't.
For that situation is why I think I'd be most comfortable with our city attorney weighing in to protect us.
All right, no,
That's all.
with apologies there, I can't.
No, it's long, too long.
So in order to move forward, is Rob, you recommend us to basically table this and consult our attorney, get an opinion, and come back?
There were a couple of questions that I didn't think needed to be answered. I'm not worried too much about it. I'll say it again, easement is simply a less preferred way to get access from a property to a private or public street. It is less preferred. But it creates potential problems down the road, maybe generations from now, but it's just less preferred. I'm more concerned about that one sliver being purchased by you that creates, it messes with the definition of subdivision or non-subdivision, and you need to work that one out.
I have no objection. If you want to recommend restrictions in my deed that you think would solve it, I'd be happy to accommodate that.
But I'll read the wording in there that I think we're looking at. Because of particular physical surrounding shape or topographic conditions of the specific property involved, a particular hardship to the owner would result as distinguished from a mere inconvenience if the strict letter of these regulations is carried out.
And with all due respect, all I can say, that's why somebody put the variance language in the code, for unique circumstances that you guys are facing.
Please stay away from variance. Variance is.
Or a waiver, you can waive this requirement too, it makes you feel better.
They can waive requirements, but you can't grant variance. Variance is a real technical term in the zoning code.
The waiver part's right next to it, we like a waiver instead. But the public's interest, I mean, think about this, Eagle Mountain development and property that butts that development, it's not in subdivision, there's no protection. We already have some property in Eagle Mountain that's not in the Eagle Mountain subdivision. not subject to their master built assurance. We're now talking about 40-something acres below that, immediately abutting that subdivision that connects to Gap Road, that has no restrictions on it other than what's present here, which could change depending on who's here today and what the feeling of the group is. There's a public interest in protecting the integrity and the nature of our neighborhoods, not having commercial development, not having large multifamily developments in Eagle Mountain. And our proposal does that by having restrictions in place. These 3 lots, instead of having the potential for this to connect and create 7 or 8 lots and connect up with Gap Road, and they're not subject to any restrictions at any time. This puts restrictions on all 3 lots and stops it. There can be no further connection or expansion beyond those 3 lots. And one of those 3 lots has already has a home on it, and I would suspect that the security fire chief couldn't get down there if he wanted to right now, because of the nature of that 12-foot driveway to Steve Bryant's home, which may predate the Eagle Mountain subdivision. I don't know. I think Dr. Strickland built the house beforehand.
And so you're worried about the character of the Eagle Mountain subdivision?
The character of our
Which
neighborhood.
this development doesn't front, and is in the end.
Exactly.
So you're worried about every development that surrounds Eagle Mountain?
Sure.
Well, initially, the adjoining property owners were concerned to begin with, and now they're in agreement
Yeah,
to move
that's
forward.
the
So now we have to
Because
figure out a way,
there's incentive involved.
we have to figure out a way to get it done.
I take it like this, I think we're problem solvers. We're not here on this board to prevent landowners such as yourselves from doing what you want to do with your property. Whether it's to make money or to build or develop, yes, we want to help you keep within the realms of things that work for the city, work for the fire department, work for code, but when you have a case like this where you have a lot of the interested parties here that, hey, here's our idea, I know it's out of the ordinary, but welcome to Batesville. Welcome to the undeveloped portions of Batesville. These conversations do become more and more. It's not that we're going to continue to grant variances, but the waivers are there for a reason, and we've used them before with good reason. And again, I think there may be a few minor details that don't trigger something much larger, like a subdivision thing, which I think can be worked out. Maybe some conversations there with Rob and how this is laid out currently, so it doesn't trigger something bigger. But as far as the access to the private public street, I mean, again, asking the people who truly matter here and getting their opinions on that. That's what these things are for. Once again, putting a city street through there would cause, obviously, the owners of everybody here. And I don't think property owners in Eagle Mountain want it to be a city street.
Well, I want to say that, you know, just so, because the public interest has become a big concern here. The public in this situation is Eagle Mountain subdivision, which has almost 200 houses. I am a board member. We have had discussions about this the past 2 months. We are very, very, very much in agreement with getting something like this proposal. Because in the interest of us, we do not want the traffic coming from Gap Road, and we do not want to see it develop to where people are coming off the Gap Road into these subdivisions any more than they are.
But as
The other-
that's not an option.
The other public interest that is getting glossed over just a bit, though I don't see that being as big an issue with what you're explaining as other developments, is if the city ever has to take on it, it's then the city's responsibility.
No, it is absolutely ironclad and clear that will run with the property in perpetuity, that there is no way the city will ever be responsible for maintenance. It is in writing, it is in the restrictions.
Very last paragraph there.
Yeah, but that puts the city into a situation where the city has to come to these people and say that this is not adequate, something has to be done, and then has to force them to spend money to maintain it. That's not reasonable to ask them to do that. Exactly, that's not reasonable to ask the city to take that on.
No, it's not. That's why there's a roadway.
Yeah, there's specific roadway.
A roadway agreement that will be an issue to hold.
Does it address maintenance You're good, okay.
Is there a maintenance?
It
cost
does.
maintenance?
Shared cost, maintenance.
Who determines when this maintenance needs to be done?
The three landowners.
Annual
An annual meeting.
So that should be the city's decision then, shouldn't it? If it's the city's access we're concerned about getting back there, the city should be the one that has to say that the maintenance is needed. The city was who determines if a private street accepted by the city or a public street, they're who determines if it needs maintenance.
Are the bullet points listed here as far as the, adjustment for fire code for future building, the last paragraph, all that, is that going into a contract?
It's in a contract that's been signed by all the parties, that's already the 14 pages with the attachments, I gave you the of it.
Right.
There is the only thing that we have not accounted for is today's development that the fire code, the state fire code requires. And the proposal that we had was if a home, we're hoping right now it's just going to stay the way it is. But if a home is constructed on the northern lot, which is not gonna happen, a lot of they're buying it, and they're gonna have that behind their home. Or the southern home, in the event that that construction happens, the driveway has to be expanded to 20 feet from 12, which means it meets the definition of a vehicular access easement at that point. So that's the only thing we haven't specifically addressed, and we can write out a contingency while we were sitting here today for that, but we have a contract in place.
Again, that's something I'd be most comfortable with voting after our attorney at that time with that, so.
Private agreement between landowners, I mean, if you're talking about the contract itself, or?
But our waivers are dependent on it, right?
Okay.
So, you know, you're asking us to waive this and that because this is promised, but I'd like for our city attorney to be able to tell us that the city.
That we're not lying to you in the proposal or the contract that says that?
Sure, that the city could have.
I'm sure the court will tell you it does. But yeah, it's fine. It's
Well,
fine.
right, but we need our officer of court to assure us of that.
So, and I was gonna try to answer, I guess Michael was asking about, I was trying to put a thought together on like where right now city accesses across private property, so like garbage collection. We pick up garbage on private property regularly, when, let's say, because those trucks are heavy, parking lots fall through, we just notify the property owner, and I guess I would see this as kind of a similar, situation if the commission approves it. You know, if the garbage truck goes up there and the driveway begins to crumble and the garbage truck can't make it up there, we'll notify the property owners and we'll stop collecting garbage until they rectify and relocate the garbage collection into a place where the truck can. So that's how we do it now. You know, we go behind Holton's and the parking lot falls through, we just call them and say we can't pick the garbage up, but the parking lot falls through, we need to fix it, and we'll move the dumpster to another location for repairs.
So,
That's kind of the only city service I can see.
As a practical matter, I see Brian Moses here down there, like, that's us every week. Mail truck goes up there once a day, sharing her here, Lord help with UPS and Amazon, and they all make regular trips up and down the road. That road has been there 35 years, and to my knowledge, there's not been an issue.
so, David, why is the city in favor of all of these waivers of the city code?
I mean, I guess it's immaterial to me. I mean, I think that there's some practical matters. You know, is it necessary to build a 24-foot wide curb and gutter street with 3 lots? I think from a practical matter, that seems really just honestly.
It does, but the purpose of the code is to prohibit these legal issues that we've been discussing and these potential future legal issues for any of these people that decide to sell these lots, which they'll have the legal right to do.
That's true. And then,
So I don't see how this is, I just don't understand how the city could be in favor of this at all, because it's not favorable to the city at all. What is good for the city is a public street made to the standards, everything followed by the code, and we don't have to waive anything. I don't understand why we should be waiving this as the city's planning commission. And I don't understand why the city would be in favor of this. This only benefits the developer.
Like I said, I personally, I don't have the dollar. Y'all get to vote on whether or not a public street is put there or a private street. I'll work it out if it's a private street or a driveway. If it's a public street, I'll work that out too.
There's not enough ownership here that's not undisputed to create a public street.
Come back when it's undisputed.
I'm on the side that's disputing it, so I mean, I'm only here presenting this because we reached an agreement, and I'm here trying to be true to the spirit of the agreement again.
And I would say something like this would absolutely necessitate public involvement.
So you're in a public hearing?
Public hearing.
We're at a
To
public hearing.
discuss these waivers. The city is voting on board.
I think the public's here though, and that's the thing,
Not, I mean, this
the parties.
a staple.
Well, some of the parties that
These
were,
are interested parties.
that were concerned, they showed up last
Yeah, we were
month
last month.
and, had their opportunity at that time. I mean, I'm not saying they should vote tonight or not.
Well, that was
but-
just to broach the issue, now we have more details.
I think they-
Get the lawyers involved, so once we come to a final proposal here, then I would think that would be what would.
Every adjoining property owner has been approached and discussed this matter.
Let me say,
President of the PLA.
last meeting, the
I am
public
president of
spoke.
the PLA.
Yeah, this is
I am.
important. Last meeting, the public spoke. They came to the meeting like they were supposed to. Because the proposal was a private street built to city specs, which essentially is the quality of a public street. The public hated that idea, despised it, did not want it, to the point where they got together and came up with a solution that didn't require that. I don't know what the point of having a public hearing is if the public speaks and we ignore 100% of the public. Just leave it at that.
I do think it's specific to, I mean, public is who's affected within the area, and I think the people that are being affected.
If you live across the street, I was so interested in this that, I came down here before I was hired.
So what the public said last time was no.
No to a public street.
No to a public street.
No to this development, no to this proposal, I just no to this public street.
No to a public street.
Progressive.
No to a public street with cul-de-sac. We don't want to increase, traffic, and we sure don't want there to be a possibility of connection to Gap Road. That's not something that we want at all. Or development of lots without restrictions of protecting integrity of the neighborhood. It's not what we want as adjoining landowners, and I know my client doesn't want that. And he doesn't want to lose his side yard where he's got his landscaping.
I called several of the commissioners with this team, I talked to John, and I didn't say yes or no, I said, please, delay it a month ago, give us time to sit down and talk and find a reasonable solution. You did, and I appreciate that. That's what we've done. We have come up with an agreement that is what we're going to do.
The only thing I'm hearing that is, something I hadn't anticipated in advance was this idea that the 20-foot strip that Steve is acquiring, off of lot 3 is creating a subdivision somehow. That's the only thing I didn't anticipate coming in here, which sounds kind of unusual, but, that's, and I take it you want to have some time to think about it, but
I'd like,
that's fair.
I personally, if I'm gonna have to vote on it, I want time to actually be familiar with what I'm voting on.
Sure.
That's all, and my understanding from your message last week was more a concern that we were going to vote on it last month, that there was concern that we were going to have a vote last month and make decisions last month whenever y'all needed time to work something out amongst yourselves and
That's true.
not rush things through.
I think that's true as well.
And so I'm just thinking maybe we haven't quite gotten there yet, that there's still also, what we've been given doesn't actually include the property lines as they would be after they change, if they change.
you have as much specificity as we have, except it's summarized instead of 10 pages. So, yeah.
And I think also because this is a special case, that just, to me, this should more fall under these subdivision regulations so that we can see this information, so that we can see all these proposed lots, property lines.
The proposed lines are, I mean, what we have is what's attached to so you have the actual, the only thing you don't have is the survey that was done specific by John Rogers to see side yards, but it's referenced in the third exhibit. You have the 3 survey, the preliminary drawings that were done by Keaton Johnson attached to this. You have the specific surveys that have been done of the proposals. But they were, the first page was done back when there was a proposal to create a public road with a cul-de-sac. You'll see it there. There's a road with a cul-de-sac, which is what started the opposition to this.
So, I guess shall we table it and all information be emailed out to the commission members?
I make a motion to postpone the vote on the waivers until next month's meeting, with the, input of our city attorney.
I tried to call him while we were sitting here. I'm sure he'll tell you when I tell you something. I'm not lying. I put my life on the line when I said that to the tribunal, but I got you. Just because we have a contract, I represent the side that bought this, and I'm here to be true to our contract. We do want you to approve it, so we're asking for you to approve it, and we'll try to meet whatever requirements you have. More time. I know that's not convenient for the other parties, but we've all worked very hard together to try to come up with something. And if you want to have a public hearing with the notice, I don't know any more than what this is. There's notice of this meeting, I believe.
The only thing I would add, if there are specific issues, if you can get them to variance, so we don't overlook something and they'll cover it at the next meeting. If there's something that you think needs to be addressed, please get in touch with us.
I don't know how to deal with the 20 acres that Steve is acquiring not being, you have to grant I guess not allow that to be considered a subdivision. I don't know how a 20-foot strip that runs north and south on lot 1 and 2 could be a subdivision. I guess it is by definition. It's kind of silly.
Because
The word is deceptive. It doesn't mean like a platted subdivision.
Right.
does that also include the line, 0.14 acres on the side? Does that also create a subdivision?
It has its own access to the street, but it's only for the parcel.
Of course, Steve's, the 20 feet has access across his current lot. And that was one of the things we discussed was the Wadley's 5.01 acres. They're purchasing without access was one discussion we had. Would have had access through their existing lot, Eagle Mountain Boulevard. Just to quote, add that to their lot was the phrase that I heard. But we thought it was silly to create lots without access, that they should have some kind of access to their future development. But we will address anything. If there are other issues you can think of that we need to consider, but we tried very hard to protect everyone involved, including people who are under contract by this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Clark,
Yeah, I make a motion.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any object? Approved.
No new business?
Any new business? No new business?
Old business, I
Old
guess,
business.
is, back to the minutes from earlier. From last month, I just happened to notice that, again, I referred to this road as, public road on
Part
Part 8
8.
instead of, Item number 8, that also needs to be corrected.
Amendment of an amendment to the minutes of part 4 and part 8. removing the word public from street.
Okay.
Public road. I'll make a motion to amend that amendment, to clean up the minutes and add, or to delete public from part 8 and part 4 minutes.
All in favor?